Sophia has been living in Germany for the past 8 years. She was always a good student and loved to learn new things. She had grown to love living here and enjoyed the cultural differences and new experiences. The snow of winter was her favorite, with the air crisp and cold, her breath turning into white clouds. When the snow finally came, it covered the ground like a soft white blanket, and Sophia could hear the muffled sound of her boots crunching through the snow as she walked. She would spend hours outside building snowmen, each one more creative and silly than the last. On the other hand, she struggled with the summer heat, but she had learned to adapt to the weather. She would often spend time at a local lake. The lake was surrounded by lush green trees that provided shade and a sweet smell of pine. Sophia dove into the refreshing water. She could feel the coolness envelop her body and hear the sound of the water rushing past her ears. She loved to float on her back and gaze up at the blue sky, feeling weightless and carefree. Sophia's family loved to travel during the summer breaks and would often visit Italy, France, or Spain to learn more about different cultures and places. Her parents had instilled in her the importance of learning about people and the past, but also about the future. Her mother had always dreamed of moving to Italy because of her love for Italian food. But her father had decided to move to Germany for better job opportunities. Despite the initial struggles of adjusting to a new country and learning the German language, Sophia's family had grown to love their new home and had made many friends in the community, and they had come a long way since moving here. Sophia felt grateful for her parents' hard work and their commitment to giving her and her family a better life. Today, Sophia came home from school in a great mood. She was so excited to show her grandpa her amazing grades. Though her parents were working hard to provide for the family and couldn't always be there for her, she was grateful that her grandparents had moved to Germany with them. She missed her parents dearly, but she knew that they loved her and that her grandparents were always there to support her. Before going to see her grandfather, she first sat down to enjoy the meal he had prepared for her. She thought about how proud he would be of her when he saw her report card. She even imagined her parents coming home early, hearing the good news and bringing her favorite food as a reward. Her dreams of becoming a doctor, or even her true dream job, an astronaut, were running through her head. Sophia walked into her grandfather's room, a room filled with miniature trains and coin collections. She was ready to show him her report card and share her achievements. "Look, Grandpa, I got really good grades today," she exclaimed, holding out her report card. But instead of praising her, her grandfather looked at her grades and shook his head. "These grades are good, Sophia, but not good enough if you want to become a doctor," he said sternly. Sophia's heart dropped. She had worked hard for her grades, putting in extra time and effort. She felt confused, frustrated, and disappointed. She was unable to comprehend why her grandfather was not praising her for her hard work. She thought she had done as well as she could and deserved some kind words and a hug from her grandfather. But instead, she was just told that she had to do more, even though she had worked much harder than anyone else in her class. Sophia was speechless, and her eyes welled up with tears. She was shocked that her grandpa wasn't proud of her. She turned around and left the room without saying a word, trying to hold back her tears. She walked to her room and sat at her desk, determined to do her homework without any mistakes. Sophia sat at her desk, trying to focus on her homework, but her thoughts kept wandering back to her conversation with her grandfather. She could feel her frustration growing with every mistake she made, and her mind was getting clouded. The numbers on the page seemed to dance and refuse to stay still. A knot was forming in her stomach, and her head began to throb. She shook with fear and felt tears forming in her eyes. Suddenly, simple math problems became harder, and her mistakes started to pile up. Her ability to focus was diminishing, and she sensed a loss of control. She knew she needed a break, but she was committed finishing her work first. A sense of stress was building up inside her, like a balloon that was ready to burst. Suddenly, she heard a small voice coming from her hamster's cage. It was Apollo, her magical hamster. "Sophia, come on, let's go to space. It'll be so much fun," he said excitedly. Sophia sighed and shook her head. "Not now, Apollo. I need to focus on my homework," she replied, trying to concentrate on the page in front of her. But Apollo persisted. "I can help you with your homework, and after that, we can visit Saturn. It's the perfect planet for you." Sophia was growing increasingly frustrated. "I don't need your help, Apollo. I can do this on my own," she said, her voice rising. Apollo sensed her anger and grew worried. "Sophia, please don't get mad. I just want to help you. Maybe going to space will help you clear your mind and you'll be able to focus better on your homework." Sophia took a deep breath and closed her eyes, trying to calm down. She knew that Apollo only wanted to help, but she just wasn't able to control her frustration. "I don't want to go to space right now, Apollo. I need to finish my homework, and I need to do it on my own, without any help," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. Apollo nodded and crawled back into his cage, looking dejected. Sophia could see the disappointment in his eyes, and she immediately felt guilty. "I'm sorry, Apollo. I didn't mean to snap at you. It's just, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I really want to do well." Apollo knew that Sophia needed a break from the stress of her homework, so he tried to persuade her to come to space with him. "Did you know that counting the rings of Saturn can help with your math skills, Sophia?" Apollo asked. He told her about how Saturn had many moons, some discovered just recently, and how counting them all could be a great way to improve her mental math. Sophia was still feeling stressed and her headache was getting worse, but she felt like she had nothing to lose at this point. She agreed to go with Apollo to Saturn, hoping that the change of scenery and the new experience might help her relax and focus better on her studies. They climbed into the shuttle, securing themselves for liftoff. Sophia's headache was pounding as the engines roared to life, sending them slowly rising into space, away from Earth. Once they were safely on their way, Apollo turned to Sophia and began describing Saturn. "Did you know that Saturn is so light it would actually float in water? It's like a giant beach ball," he exclaimed, grinning at Sophia. "And every gas giant has rings, but Saturn's rings are extra special. They're made of ice and rock, and they're so big and beautiful." Apollo continued to share his knowledge about Saturn, like how it had the most moons of any planet in our solar system, even though Jupiter was bigger. Apollo's enthusiasm was contagious, and Sophia began to feel a glimmer of excitement, but the memory of her grandpa's disappointed face and her unfinished homework kept lingering in her mind. Sophia peered out of the window of their spacecraft as it flew closer to Saturn. She marveled at the planet's brilliant rings, with hues of gold, orange, and deep red. "Wow, Apollo, the rings are so beautiful. How were they formed?" Apollo, who was sitting on Sophia's shoulder, cleared his throat and began to explain. "Well, Sophia, the rings are made up of millions of small pieces of rock, ice, and dust that orbit the planet. It's believed that the rings were created when a large moon or comet got too close to Saturn's gravity and was torn apart by the planet's tidal forces." Sophia listened intently, fascinated by the story. "How long have they been around for?" she asked. "The rings of Saturn are believed to be over 100 million years old, making them much younger than Saturn itself," Apollo replied. "But will they be together forever?" she asked with concern. Apollo hesitated, knowing that his answer might disappoint her. "Unfortunately, the rings of Saturn won't last forever. Over time, the particles that make up the rings will be pulled into the planet's atmosphere and eventually disappear." Sophia felt a pang of sadness and looked out the window again, admiring the rings while they were still there. "I can't imagine a Saturn without its rings," she said. Apollo understood her disappointment and tried to console her. "Don't worry, Sophia. The rings will be around for a very long time so we can enjoy their beauty while we can," he said, hoping to make her feel better. Sophia nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. She couldn't wait to see more of Saturn and its wonders, but the thought of losing the rings made her sad. Resolute to get a closer look, Sophia took control of the ship, ignoring Apollo's warning about getting too close. She thought that she knew what she was doing and didn't need anyone's help. But as they got closer, the ship's instruments started to go haywire. and they were being pulled in by Saturn's magnetic field. "Apollo, what's happening? Why are we being pulled in?" Sophia asked, looking out the window as they got closer to Saturn. "We're caught in Saturn's strong magnetic field. We need to adjust the thrusters and steer the ship away," Apollo replied, trying to remain calm. "I can handle it, Apollo. I'll just use all the energy from the thrusters to get us out," Sophia said confidently, refusing to listen to Apollo's advice. "Sophia, that's not a good idea. It's too risky. We could damage the ship," Apollo said, trying to convince her. "I've got this, Apollo. Trust me," Sophia replied. Apollo watched nervously as Sophia adjusted the thrusters to full power, causing the ship to shake and rattle. He could hear the hull's metal bending as the ship struggled to break free from the magnetic field. Come on, we can do this," Sophia muttered under her breath, her eyes fixed on the control panel. But just as they were about to break free, there was a loud bang, and the ship started to spin out of control. The plan didn't work. Instead, the ship started spinning out of control, and they began to fall towards the planet. Apollo tried to regain control of the ship, but it was too late. They were falling towards Saturn, and there seemed to be nothing they could do to stop it.